What does it mean to live life as more than a survivor?
Unpacking that question is what we're all about.
On this podcast, we speak about life, its ups and downs, and everything in between.
Join us as we connect with others and discover more through stories and conversations.
Come as you are.
Recovering.
Healing.
Growing.
I'm John Westhaver.
And I'm Michelle Escamilla. And this is More Than a Survivor podcast.
Okay, and this is episode 2 of More Than a Survivor podcast. Welcome back. Thank you guys for listening to the first episode. And if you haven't listened to the first episode, go back and listen to the first episode before you watch this, or listen or watch this one here. I'm John Westhaver.
I'm Michelle Escamilla.
Hey! And we are More Than a Survivor podcast. And, yeah, I'm excited for this episode and the next several episodes that we're doing. The guests we're inviting to come and join the conversations. Thank you. Anything you want to say, Michelle, before we get going?
No, excited to be here. How are you, John? How are things? How has these past couple of weeks been treating you since I last saw you? What have you been thinking about since we did our first episode? All these questions into one. Go.
Yeah, I know. Like it's funny because we're just before we're doing this the podcast, we're trying to figure out the tech side of things, and just kind of getting that down. And I'm good. We just went through Christmas and the New Year. And the girls were excited for Christmas. They love Christmas. They were excited about Santa. We try to do a big thing around, Santa coming and stuff like that there. So the girls really had a fun time. New Year's was nice and quiet. How about you?
Good as well. It's funny how I think different seasons of life we look forward to at first, like doing events and parties and gatherings and stuff. And then there comes a time when you're just ready for the quiet. So this year for us, it was a quiet holiday season. And I think we were really happy with that. For once in our first time ever, we got to go to the beach for the holidays, which previously living in Canada is something that was a little harder to do. It's just cooler to do, chillier. But we were in nicer weather, so that was a nice big change that we had. So overall, can't complain. And I'm ready to start talking about this next topic, which I know that you and I kind of were going back and forth as to what it was going to be, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the struggle because the struggle is real. So here we are.
Yeah, that's funny. Like the struggle is real, and I don't know about you. But when I'm inside of struggle, I shut the world out. Like I just kind of go within. I kind of sometimes I manifest stay away from me sort of thing, a little bit of leave me alone sort of thing. And I kind of go within when I'm struggling and try to figure things out and not ask for help. And it's probably one of the worst things to do, but that's what I do. I kind of go within and try to figure things out on my own and not ask for help and try to get through it alone. And how about you? What are your strategies to get through?
Sure. So let's give a little bit more context as to how did we get to this topic of struggle? Because again, there's that saying that says the struggle is real. For me, essentially what that means is, as well as things seem like they're going, there are moments when there is struggle and it's real life and it's authentic, which is what we're all about here on this podcast. So I think the core question that we're asking is, what are some of the struggles that we've had either in life or during our recovery, or in just different seasons that we've gone through? So yes. So to answer this question about struggles, I think the way that I cope with struggling is I'm slowly getting better at it, but I think similar to you, I often think that I can manage these things on my own. And, the more time I spend on this earth, I'm realizing that there are probably other tactics that have been helpful to me in terms of finding that support, but it really has been a lot of self-work to be able to get to that place of vulnerability and be okay with the fact of telling people that I do need help or that I am struggling. For me, I think, during my recovery and even now, it's been tough to kind of peel away and share that vulnerability with people that's the real me.
Awesome. Yeah. I find for me, that I try and do things alone. I kind of hide out a lot. And just going back to, like, I'm going to go back to the beginning when my car crash, when I was involved in the car crash. When I woke up from this coma, because I don't remember any part of the crash, and I remember waking up in the coma, it was just chaos. Waking up as a burn survivor, not knowing what happened, and the struggles that I went through in the initial stages of my recovery was dealing with the burn trauma. Dealing with like the bandage changes, dealing with how I looked, how people saw me, how I didn't want people to see me as broken and destroyed, and dealing with the surgeries, the grafting, and all that stuff there. And in the beginning for me, it was probably much like you. I had a lot of family around me, supporting me, helping me through the initial stages. But after a while, it was like I'm on my own, like doing my own thing, sort of thing. And there was different things that I was struggling with, like finding work, dating. It could be, creating life after the trauma. And I was one of those guys that didn't ask for a lot of help and tried to figure it out on my own. I was very stubborn in that sense, maybe, and but I saw that I wanted to have something, like I wanted a career, I wanted to have a life worth living, and so for me, the tools that I really used is like, I find myself lost for words in this moment. Yeah.
Well, let me jump in and offer some thoughts as well. You were saying about, again, we're talking, this idea and this topic this week is about struggle. And I think my inner jokester kind of says, me struggles never. But as you said, exactly is so true. Let's go back to the beginning. Car accident, trauma, struggle. Let's start with the fact that I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to pick up a spoon or a pencil or anything because I did not have that function. Let's talk about the fact that I had to ask for help to do basic things like get dressed, go to the bathroom, scratch my head. Like, these are things I could not do. And I think for anybody that could be really debilitating. Like the fact that you no longer are in control of your own body and you have to ask for help for these things is a challenge. And for anyone who has gone through that, you know how difficult it is and just how hard it can be. I think sometimes to maybe have before been a really independent person and then have to realize that you need to depend on people in order to get better. So let's just start there. Let's just start at the fact that this is so real and it does happen.
Yeah, and for those people that are listening and you haven't been through something extreme like this here, don't disengage the conversation because you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with and you're struggling with whatever you're struggling with. And as Michelle is talking about, learning to walk again, learning to get dressed, what I'm flashed to is like wiping myself after I use the washroom. Like my hands were completely bandaged. I'm 75% burnt. My hands are bandages. And I'm an 18-year-old independent, 240-pound heavyweight wrestler, stubborn, big-headed, arrogant, you name it. And I had to call a nurse in to wipe me after I used the washroom. I remember sitting in that washroom crying because I was so embarrassed to call somebody to come in and do this simple task, where it was nothing big for them. Like it was operational for them. Like it was just one of the things we do. And but for me, I'm even almost tearing up about it because I remember it so vividly. I just remember how embarrassed I was, like how ashamed I was that, on top of everything else that I was dealing with, there was a simple task of having to ask somebody to come in and perform this simple operational task of wiping my tuchus, my butt, after I used the washroom. And it was such a hard thing to do. And, sometimes the nurses would come in because they knew I was in there because they had walked me in, and they would say, call when you're ready to come out or when you need help. And after a while they'd come in and, you okay, John? You need help? And I would just be crying because it was so hard, so frustrated. And funny story is, I remember they'd have to like hold me with one so I didn't fall over with one hand, and then they're grabbing paper with the other hand and they're kind of bunching up with their gloves on, so they're bunching up and they're wiping me. And I remember, being mad because the lady didn't wipe it around her hand, to wipe me, sort of thing. And it's just the simple things, like it was just like so funny. The things we kind of lash out at, but it was just like, in that moment, it was just like chaos for me. There's so many things that were unfamiliar, so many things I was dealing with. And looking back, like, it was hard in that moment. But as I was exposed to those moments and I had to work through them and I had to deal with them, it helped me, get through the next one. And it built that strength and the muscle to be able to cope with these things and work through these things and see that, these are the things that I have to deal with.
Yeah, I think, there is a lot of challenge that people experience in the initial stages of any sort of injury or, a traumatic event. Again, I can also think about very similar experiences. And I think also about how hard it was to explain to people what I was feeling, because really I only understood exactly how I was feeling in that moment. And, that I relate that to this idea of the struggle, that my parents couldn't really understand what I was going through. My friends couldn't really understand what I was going through. And I think that, as you kind of were saying, of being this lone wolf or independent person, I thought that I could manage my struggle on my own. And I want to take this moment to say that I see you. I see the people, we see the people who identify as that, as I can do this on my own, and just want to gently encourage you and say, it's okay to be in community. It's okay to have moments where you think that, I need to do this on my own. And to remind you that there's so much strength in being in community. As you were saying, even though it bothered you that nurse had to come in, we look back and I think about the nurses as well and people, the staff. And if it wasn't for their support, I literally would not have been able to, go to the bathroom or get dressed. As much as it bothered me in that moment, I now understand that it was a really important part of my recovery. So as hard as that is, just wanting to remind people that there is a lot of strength in community and in being vulnerable.
Yeah. I
was just going to say, I want to fast forward a little bit, and I want to think about now the time when you're out of the hospital, you're out of that, initial stage, and you kind of touched upon this, saying the struggle of, making friendships and dating.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing. What was that like for you?
So friendships were easy for me because I didn't struggle with that too much because with my car crash that I was involved in, there was 3 other teens in it that were killed, and I was left as a sole survivor. I survived the crash, and it was in a small town, and I really had a lot of support. And I grew up in a big family. There's 7 or 8 siblings, So I grew up in a big family. So I had a sense of family and community around me supporting me that whole time. So I really didn't feel like an outcast. I really didn't have trouble in that sense. But coming to dating, oh my God, that was the most challenging time for me because I didn't think I was worthy. I didn't think I was lovable. I didn't think anybody would ever want to date me. God, I'm ugly and broken, destroyed, and I didn't think anybody would find me attractive. And, probably about a year or two after the car crash, I was like, okay, maybe I'll ask a couple girls out. There was a couple girls that I liked, and I became friends with them and stuff. And I had asked them out, and on two different occasions, they were both like, no, I'd rather just be friends. And it was so devastating for me. The second time that happened, it was so devastating for me that I cut this person out of my life. I couldn't deal with it. I was just so embarrassed, so rejected, and I was so heartbroken that I was like, no, I can't deal with this. And I just cut that person out of my life. And I've since, reconnected and, talked to this person and apologized. And, that person's in my life now. But for me, it was such a hard thing. And I stopped dating, even trying to date, for probably 6 or 7 years. And I watched family and friends date and get married and have families and create, these extraordinary lives, which I wanted. And for me, I always had hope at one time, even though I thought I was unlovable and ugly and broken and destroyed. I had faith. I had faith that at some point in my life that I would find somebody who loves me and would marry me. And the reason I say that is because all of my fingers, except for one, was undamaged, almost undamaged. And that was my ring finger. And I took that as a sign. I took that as a sign that someday there's going to be a purpose for that ring finger. Mm-hmm. And so I just was like, you know what? And in the present moment, I'm just going to take a break and not even worry about it, because down the road it will happen. And that's what I hung on to. And eventually down the road, I started dating, became friends, and met my wife, and who's an extraordinary lady, and ended up getting married. We now have 3 beautiful children, and extraordinary life here in Victoria. But if you told me when I was laying in the hospital bed that I would eventually find someone who loves me for me and makes me happy, and I'd have 3 beautiful children and an extraordinary life, you probably would have said you were full of crap. That it's not possible. I'm broken, ugly, and destroyed. Who's going to love me for who I am? But here I am.
And now here we are.
Extraordinary life.
Yeah.
How about you?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a beautiful story, by the way. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a reminder of hope, and it's a reminder of also of mindset, which is huge. I think with this idea of believing in a greater life than beyond just the title of survivor. It is manifesting, it is envisioning, it is putting out there what can be, and that is beautiful. For me, I think what I would say was, I think what I struggled with growing up personally in terms of like friendships and dating and all that kind of stuff is I just really wanted to fit in. I really wanted to, live that life where, social and everyone's friend. And I think I am a recovering people pleaser. I will probably always be a recovering people pleaser. There's so many layers that come into that, being the oldest sibling, eldest child. You just want to, be helping everybody and all of these things. But I think it comes down to, I really wanted to fit in. Now that I look back at it, I can name it. But at the time, I did not know how to describe it. I just knew that the friends that I had before my accident, I wanted to have still be my friends, which, spoiler alert, totally did not happen. They did not want to be my friends anymore. I think that looking as different as I did, as I mentioned before, plastic face mask and like pressure garments all on my body, They had cut my hair. I had all of these scars. They no longer wanted to talk to me and no longer wanted anything to do with me. And that was really difficult to cope with, because this was my circle. This was the people that I used to spend all of my time with. And now that has changed. And I had no control over the fact that it had changed. So
how did that impact you? How did that impact you in the moment?
Yeah. I think if it wasn't for, as I had mentioned, as I will always mention and say, the fact that my immediate family and other people outside of those direct friends were very supportive. If they hadn't helped me coach that inner voice to say that there are going to be people in this life who are not okay with you, but that's fine and okay because we love you. If I hadn't had that inner coaching to have that voice, maybe I would have believed that small child's inner voice that says, I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not worthy of having those friends. And it really was a constant battle. It really was, it had to be the self growth and development to really understand that whatever I believed that I'm not lovable, or that, because I look different, I can't have these friends, is not true, because of everything else that the people that I love are rooting me in and are reminding me of. So it was difficult, but it really was a transformation. As I was in my recovery, I understood that. I understood that there were going to be people that were not okay with me, and that was okay. It was not meant to be at that time. So thankfully, I decided, to find other people who were okay with me, who were really cool and funny and sweet. And I ended up, making different friends, which I think in the end was better for me, because it was the crowd that I was with before was, I don't think, the best crowd to be with. So it worked out in the end. But in terms of also dating, caveat in here is, I think high school trying to date is such a sticky situation. I think that, there's so much pressure socially to try to, date this person or be friends with this person. So as I look back at it, man, I think, dating during high school and even college can be really stressful. But I think ultimately my struggle was that I wanted to fit in. My friends were dating this person. I wanted to date, this group of people as well. And it just didn't work out for me. And initially that was my thought was, is it because of what I look like? Is it because of what I've been through? Is it because, well, I grew up in this town in Canada that is diverse, but I think my hometown was not as diverse as other places I've lived. So my question was, is it because I have different color skin? Is it because I have, different texture hair? And I thought all of these things, this inner voice, that immediate thought of comparison. Is it because I'm not like them? So it was a struggle. But again, I come back to the fact that it had to be a constant reworking and rewiring of my brain to say, it's not because of those things. It's just not my time. And kind of like what you're saying, with this hope that I am going to find this person. And ultimately, I did not find them in high school. I did not find them in my college. I found them through a different circle of friends. And we could talk about that at another time, about relationships and all that kind of stuff. But I realized that whatever I hoped and desired to attract is what I attracted. I wanted to attract somebody in my life, a partner who saw me, for all the qualities that I have. Also because I am fabulous, and they did recognize that as well. But
yes, you are.
I found that, it took a lot of work internally to understand that it's not about fitting in. It's about being who you are.
Yeah. And I completely agree. One of the things that I discovered, and I don't know, and I'd ask you if you would discover this for yourself too. One of the things I discovered early on is when I let go of how I looked, how my scars looked, and any conversation around my scars, it disappeared in other people's eyes. So for me, it was like, it wasn't John the burn survivor, it was John the guy. It was those conversations disappeared when I disappeared those um, conversations around my scars and how I looked. When I disappeared all that, it didn't get in the way of asking people out, things like that there. How about you?
Exactly. 100% true. I think about that in so many different scenarios in my life. I've had friends who I became really close with in different seasons of life. And whenever they would introduce me to like either their family or a sibling or another friend or a coworker, they would never describe me as like, oh yeah, she's this burn survivor, this and that, because that's not how I presented myself. I just kind of like lived my life. And they would tell me like, oh yeah, I forgot, because they mentioned it like, oh, you didn't tell me that she's a survivor or something like that. Because to my friend, it was not something that they saw first, because it's something that I didn't see as my initial identity. It's part of my identity, but there are so many other things about me, as a friend or as a person, that I truly just kind of live my life that way. And then remember that, oh yeah, there are other things as well that to share with people.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. It's a part of who you are. It's not. It doesn't define you. Yeah, totally agree. Um, yeah,
So let me ask you then. We're talking about these different ways that which are real. The struggles are real. What are some ways that you, like, if, for example, in dating, what are some ways that you coped with those struggles, or like, what are some tips for people who maybe have similar, things that challenges that they're going through their lives? What are some tips or ways of coping or working through those struggles?
yeah. One of the ones I would say that the biggest tip is be present. You know, be present in the moment and let go of all the noise in your head. Like there'll probably be so much noise in your head about, oh, doing this right or doing that right, or how do I look and how's this and this and all. Like let go of all the noise and be present. Um, when you're present and in the moment and just connected to the person you're with, you know, you get to experience that. You get to experience that moment, that person. And if you're too wrapped up in yourself and how you look and in your head and your brain, what's going on, all this stuff here, you lose that moment, you lose that connection, I think. So it's really letting go of the internal noise of what you think is going on, and just be present with what's going on.
Mm,
How
yeah,
about you?
I second that. No, I second that. I think two things for me came to mind, but my initial thought was exactly what you said, let go. And that is so hard, John. It is so hard to let go. And to kind of, hop onto what you're saying here, I see it as that noise or that voice. Let's name it. It's oftentimes anxiety. It's oftentimes, what are they going to think if? What are they going to do if? And that is anxiety. So
Yep.
that inner challenge, that inner struggle can often really limit us to doing things. So, for example, like you're saying, let's say for me, a huge one was either going to anytime summertime rolled around, you knew that a pool party was coming or the beach was coming, and so the initial anxiety, that noise in your head, that voice that says, oh God, bathing suit or bikini season is coming. What are you going to do? Right. So to come back to a tip or trick, it really is that like ability to let go of what that voice is saying and to dare to take a step and say, okay, maybe I won't wear my two-piece bikini, but I'm going to go to this party and, wear something that I'm comfortable in, but to not let it stop me from living my life. And the second tip that I think kind of goes with that is, for me, what's been really helpful is to just laugh, to have a sense of humor throughout all of this. The moment you start taking yourself too seriously is the moment that you're going to start feeling that rigidity, that rigid square, that, life has to be a certain way. But the moment that I start thinking like, okay, so what if I do show up in, a bathing suit to this party? And I'm going to talk about how, I don't know, it's designer. It's one of a kind designer, as I've got, a scar on my arm or whatever. No one else, it's exclusive. No one else has one just like it. But this idea that to give yourself some freedom in those really challenging moments.
Yeah. And adding on top of that, because that's amazing, because you brought to light so much stuff for me, like, because I never thought about it before. Like, I never thought what it would be like for a girl to have to go and put on a bikini, because, as in today's modern society, summertime is usually beach time and usually less clothes and more revealing. And as a burn survivor, I'm assuming that it would be really challenging.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
There's so many layers to that at another episode we'll have to talk about, because there's not only the person's anxiety, but then you think about like the people in your circle. So like your family. I thought for me, it was, my parents were concerned that if I did wear a dress or a short sleeve shirt, they didn't want to see me hurt. So they were constantly also concerned and like asking me, are you sure? Are you sure? Which could then feel really limiting. Like maybe they don't want me to. So there's so many different layers that we could unpack in that. But really, I think, again, it just comes down to that noise or that anxiety that we experience of what if they think this? What if I'm judged?
Yeah.
What if they don't like me? All of these things that we start to like create in our minds and then can limit us to even avoiding the situation, when in reality, that's one of the most harmful things that we can do, because then we'll just skip that side of our lives completely and stop ourselves from experiencing things that can be really freeing. And then again, being stuck in this idea of, just being a survivor.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing, and what I think about when you're sharing this in that moment is when you get all that noise in your head and you're having all these thoughts and fears and what's going on, you're not actually in the moment, because you're in survival. You're trying to survive the situation. And what happens is your brain saying, based on this moment, based on my history, that, what I've been through, what I've seen, what I've experienced, and these moments, these situational moments that's happening in the moment, my brain's forecasting this. So you're trying to avoid this drastic thing happening down the road. So you're trying to like figure it all out in your brain, and you're like, how do I do this in the moment so this, what I think is going to happen down the road, doesn't happen, when you have no freaking clue what's going to happen down the road, because it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet. So if you can let go of what you think is going to happen, we'll let go of the past and just be connected and discover the person in front of you, discover the moment, discover the experience, and let it arise. And when that noise shows up, let it go. Say, thank you for sharing, because it's always going to share. It's always going to have a thought. Thank you for sharing. Let it go. Just be present. Have just do a check-in. Like, what's going on in my head right now? Am I freaking out? Okay, relax. Be present. I have no clue what's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. And
Exactly.
I think it's a powerful tool to use if you can develop that tool.
Yeah, I mean, a practical way of doing that really is just taking those small steps. So, I think about someone who, let's say, has just received some sort of terminal illness or something really, really challenging. And, for me, for some reason, maybe because this is the community I'm closely working with right now, is folks with cancer. So I think about, let's say they just got a diagnosis and the hair is falling out, and they have a choice. They either need to cut their hair or figure out what they're going to do. And I think for a lot of people, especially women, the long hair or having hair really is part of your identity. It's for a lot of people, it's what makes them feel feminine. It's for what makes them feel, who they are and all these kinds of things. And then let's take into practice exactly what we're talking about. So initially you have a million thoughts saying, they're not going to like me, or what if people look at me weird, or all of these things. If we take into practice exactly what John is saying, and what we're both saying here, is take a second to reflect on that and say, okay, but is this true? Is it true that, has anyone said anything? Do I know this to be true? Let's take a second to be present. What's the worst thing that can happen if I decide to cut my hair? It's going to be gone for a few months and then it'll grow back. Not much else. I mean, there are other things, but the truth is that whatever is debilitating you or stopping you from living your life in this situation of, something that's physical is momentary. But by not, by listening and giving into that anxiety, those concerns and that fear, by listening to that and having to stop living your life or be who you are because of it, can stop you. It's not momentary. That fear will not be momentary. It will continue to rule and plan your life around that fear. So it really is important, I think, to be present, and just encourage folks to also encourage them to be lighthearted and find moments of, taking things a bit more, I don't know, not be so strict with yourself, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And what I love this. I love having conversations with you because I get so much out of these conversations to contribute and stuff. So it's so perfect. One thing I just want to add on top of what you're saying, which is amazing, is before you get into these situations, do some exercises. What are the conversations that are going to come up for me in my head when I'm in these situations, and write those things down, and then work through that before you even get into the situation. So what if they reject me? Okay, so work through that exercise. What if someone rejects me? Is it the end of the world? Will I die? Will all my friends hate me? Will everybody abandon me? Will I be alone forever? Work through that and resolve it for yourself. And disappear that conversation so that when you're in the moment and that arises, be like, I already dealt with that. Go away. Go away. Go away, fly. Go away. I see flies are a can of mosquitoes. Go away, mosquito. Get out of here.
Exactly.
And you work through those different things that you can't be with. And if a new conversation comes up for you, and takes you out, work through that later on as well. Work through that. Maybe work through that in the moment with the person. Be like, hey, you know what? I just want to take a break for a second and be like, I want to share with you what's going on for me. I'm really freaking out over here because I want to make this perfect impression on you because I think you're awesome. And I see something, I see you in my future somehow down the road sort of thing, or whatever it is. And I'm I want to work through this. I know all these conversations are coming up for me, and I want to work through this. What about you? Have a dialogue, because you never know. That may be what it is. That'd be you know what? I want that person in my life because I know that when tough times down the road arise, I want that person on my team. I want that person beside me because I know with that person beside me on my team, we're going to be able to get through it.
Exactly. I think there's so much power in just naming whatever you feel is awkward or uncomfortable, because it's very likely that maybe someone else feels the same thing too. They just are afraid to say it. So name it. Like you said, I'm feeling this right now because I'm here. I want to make connections. I want to make friends and want to make a good impression, but I feel nervous. There's a lot of freedom in doing that. So, and, I think to kind of summarize a lot of this is the only way to get through anxiety. The way to get through anxiety is to push, to do these exercises and practice. Understand that failure or rejection or all these feelings are kind of part of life. So they happen at some point, and the moment that we decide to walk through it, and instead of running away from it, there's so much growth available to you. So pushing through the anxiety.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Awesome. So that was another powerful episode with me and Michelle. I think I think this is really a cool podcast that we get to make in the world and conversation, and I'm excited for what's to come. I'm just excited to be on this journey with you, Michelle. Like, I really am. Like, I think we're kindred spirits. I think
there is, there's a lot that is similar, yet there's so much that is different. And we both believe in this mission of sharing it with you, sharing it with the world. So if there's any questions, if there are things that you want us to talk about, please let us know. We'll make sure to add our information so you can connect with the podcast. And we can't wait to see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks. See you soon. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on More Than a Survivor podcast. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, like, and leave a rating. Your feedback not only helps us reach more people, but it also makes our show even better. Got a question or a thought on today's topic? Drop us a comment. We read every single one. And if you think a friend would appreciate this episode, don't hesitate to share it. We'll see you next time. Thanks and goodbye.